Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to our Elite Agent training tonight. Mario Delgadillo here out of Dallas, Texas. Let me quickly go ahead and mute everybody. That way we don't have any babies that get out of control. And I know it's because I know my team. We've got a lot of mamas on here. And it's okay if I see them, but for the recording purposes, we don't want to hear them just yet. But tonight, guys, I definitely want to spend some time bringing you guys up to speed on some very, very basic, very foundational, but very powerful tools. It's going to be a two-part study, one part tonight, second part coming up next week. So how bad are taxes today, right? So let's dive right into the information, but we're going to start off with a quiz, all right? So I did give you guys the ability, okay, to unmute yourself. So if you guys know these answers, go ahead and unmute or type it in. But Guy, what was the highest tax bracket in the history of our country? Does anybody know that?
I
I think there
think,
was one where it was in the 90 percentile.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say 90,
Don't ask me
99,
when.
98.
not 90, not 90 and 98, but 91%, guys. In 1935, it was 91%. Any dollar over $200,000. Okay, that's pretty crazy. And so, what was the highest tax bracket in the entire decade of the 70s? Does anybody know that? No? Okay. It was 70% for the entire decade of the 70s for any dollars over $200,000. Now, what is the highest tax bracket that someone would pay right now? Okay. And, this is going to be, the villainized Mr. Bill Gates and all the elite one percenters. What do they pay in taxes right now? Does anybody know?
Okay, I don't know if this is right, but is it lower or higher? Is it 40 something or 50?
You're just guessing. Who else knows?
Because I
I
just
thought
checked my tax bracket. I shouldn't be that hot. They
I
shouldn't be
thought the bracket is
7%.
like 33, and then it moves to like 37 after the Trump thing expires.
It's actually 37% right now. There you go. For me to knew it, love it. 37%, right? And so when we look at where we're at right now, guys, how does 37% stack up to where we've been in the past, right? Um, the truth is that we're paying less in taxes right now than we've probably ever paid before. But let's tie this into what do our clients say? Right? See, so when I do financial seminars often, and I ask clients, how bad are taxes? What type of answers do you think we get? Oh my God, taxes are the worst. Oh my God, they're crying and complaining, but they really don't even understand, guys, that taxes, you know, are actually pretty darn good compared to where we've been over the last 100 years. So I tell people, do you think taxes will be the same, higher, or lower in the future? Right? What do you think people answer? Higher, always, right? They always say they're going to be higher. They absolutely are going to be higher. Well, but let's talk about why. Okay. Why would taxes be higher in the future? And what's going to happen on January 1st, 2026? Okay. So the answer is real simple. It's going to go from 37 to 39.6%. And all Congress has to do to make this happen is nothing. And how many of you know that Congress is pretty darn good at doing nothing? But why, right? Why are they increasing the taxes? So it helps, it will make us think, well, what is the government going to be spending on, right? First things first is debt, okay? So we've got an unbelievable debt ceiling right now. And what scares people the most is not necessarily just the principal, the debt itself, it's the interest that just keeps piling up on top of it. Medicare is another expense that they'll be spending on. This is why they tax us so that they can pay their bills, right? Medicaid, okay, Social Security, the CARES Act, and pensions, right? There's still some out there, but let's talk a little bit about pensions because this is one that comes up often. And I want to share with you guys a very common misconception that many workers in our country have, right? And here's the misconception. Well, if my company were to go under, the government guarantees 2/3 of my pension every single year until I die, right? Guys, that is what is called an unfunded obligation, basically a promise the government made that they can't afford to keep. Right? And it reminds me of what my dad used to say growing up. He always used to say, Mario, don't let that mouth write a check that your butt can't cash, right? And that was his way of saying, you know, you better make sure you know who you're talking to, because one day somebody's going to call you and you better be able to whoop them or they're going to whoop you, you know? And so that's really what it comes down to, guys. And some experts believe that the US has up to $120 trillion in unfunded obligations. So they make a lot of promises that they really can't afford to fulfill, right? So let me give you an example, right? We look at Social Security, and this one is so important, guys, because as we are planning for retirement, right, with our clients, we have to understand where Social Security was when it was created, why it was created, where it's come, and where it's going. Because how many of you guys, I have to be brutally honest with you, most people think Social Security is their security. Like, oh, you know, I know I haven't put any money away yet, and blah, blah, blah. But in the back of their mind, they're really, truly, honestly banking on Social Security. They're really thinking, and they're going to be rudely awakened, by the way, even if they got it, right? It's not going to be what they thought. But let's talk about Social Security, right? So what year was Social Security first established? 1935, okay? Now, how many workers were putting in to those that were taking out? The ratio was 42 workers putting in for every one person taking out. So, you know, a lot of people putting money in and only a little bit taken out. Now, how old did you have to be to draw out Social Security in 1935? 65 years old. Get this, check this out. This is pretty crazy. What was the life expectancy in 1935? 62. So they had 42 people putting in, and they're like, these guys ain't even going to be around to take it out, right? And if you happen to make it to 65 years old, how long did you actually draw out Social Security on average? 2 years. So even if you made it to 65, you were drawing out for 2 years before you croaked. So when Social Security was created, it was rock solid. There was so much money there because of these statistics. So, well, what happened then? Right? Well, let's tell a tale that you guys have probably already heard before. After World War II, the greatest generation had the biggest generation ever, the baby boomers, right? How many of you guys had grandparents that were in World War II, right? I did, right? Both sides of my family, right? World War II came back, and on one side, just in my family, 7 kids. On the other side, 6 kids, right? I mean, I guess when you go to war against Hitler, and the world almost caved in. You come home and you just want some loving, right? they just went to work. But here's the problem, and this is something that I learned new in my own studies for this training. The baby boomers, however, had 30% less children than their greatest generation. So they had this huge generation of people, right, who were going to someday start taking from it, but they didn't have enough offspring to keep putting into it. Do you guys get that part? I always thought, oh, well, you know, the baby boomers are just so big. But yes, there's a huge generation that just is going to be taking out of Social Security, which they are now. But the secondary problem to this massive generation was that they didn't get busy. They had 30% less children. So it's like, man, we have this huge generation of people that down the road are going to be drawing from Social Security, but they didn't have enough people that would end up growing up one day to put in to cover all of them drawing out, right? So this caused a massive ripple effect, and we're seeing it right now, okay? So what we do is we're going to talk about the current Social Security statistics, okay? So The ratio of people putting into Social Security versus people taking out is now 3-1. Crazy. So 3 people are putting in and 1 person is drawing it out. Used to be 42-1. The ratio in 10 years will be 2-1. Okay. Here's where it gets crazy. You're able to now draw it out earlier at 62. And when you do draw it out, what is the current average that people stay on Social Security? 23 years. Because the life expectancy is longer. This is bananas, guys. And this is just simple, basic mathematics. This is not a fear tactic. This is what people are up against, right? So the Social Security went from an insurance that said, hey, should you last a little longer, we got you covered, to a pension that people rely on for nearly 0.25% of their life. 23 years, guys. That's the average person taking out on Social Security. And in 10 years, 2 people will put in and 1 will take out, right? And that's not to mention, right, all the other things that we have to account for. So with that being said, guys, let me introduce you to somebody. How many of you guys know who David Walker is? Any of you guys know who David Walker is? Okay, so he was the comp controller for the federal government under Obama and Bush and Clinton. Okay, so from 98 to 2008, he was the head of government accountability office, and then he was a CPA of the federal government from 98 to 2008 as well. Basically, the CPA for the United States government. Okay, so Lewis, you might like this guy. Lewis does taxes and whatnot, right? And the reason we bring him up is because, guys, there is nobody better at understanding this stuff than Mr. David Walker. Okay, and let me tell you, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here because I'm going to read you guys some statistics from this gentleman, which is unreal. Okay, so basically he said that we have promised way more than we can afford to keep. And here's what's scary. He said, guys, you think that Social Security is bad? Medicare is 5 times worse of a problem than Social Security. Okay, let me pull this up. All right, and so with that being said, guys, he said in order for the government to keep their promises, right, to be able to cash the check that they wrote, they have to double taxes immediately. And we talk about this a lot in our presentation, right? So he said, but guess what? Don't worry. You don't have to double them yet. But every single year that you prolong doubling taxes, the national debt will grow by $2 trillion on average every year. So don't have to do it yet, but every year you don't, the debt's going to grow by $2 trillion every year until the breaking point. You guys know what the breaking point is as far as our national debt is concerned? $53 trillion. Right now we're at 33 trillion. Okay. When we get to 53 trillion in debt, all that means is that all of the money that we bring in every year will only be able to pay the interest that we owe on that 53 trillion. We will not have money to cover Social Security. We will not have money for Medicare. We will not have money for the CARES Act. We will not have money for Medicaid. And so it's just a giant boom. Okay. That's where we're headed. And see what he went on a show, and you guys can look him up, David Walker. I encourage you to do it. He's got a book that I'm going to start reading as well. But he went on a show on NPR, and he was sharing this. Well, he basically was so like struck by what he had found that he quit. He stepped down and he said, I've got to go and tell the world that the United States is bearing down on a massive collision course that they don't understand, right? And so he was on NPR and he said, he was talking to this gal and she didn't believe him. And he said, I can share with you a 4-letter word that will prove everything I'm saying to you. Does anybody know what that 4-letter word is? Type it in or say it. Some of you might be thinking of a 4-letter word right now, but for another reason, once you hear these statistics. Nobody wants to take a shot at that 4-letter word? Here it is. This is what he said will prove everything he just said. Math, basic math. He's like, I'm going to just show you math. It's just math, right? And here's what he said. It's real simple, guys. If what you are bringing in, okay, is this much, and what you are paying out is this much, you have really two options. You either double what you're bringing in, or you lower what you're paying out, or somewhere in the middle. But you cannot keep doing what you're doing. Think about your own personal financial situation. How much money do you bring in on a month? How much do you have to pay out? And we know there's always going to be a breaking point, right? And so what do? A lot of us have said, you know what? I can't just work on a full-time job. I need to do something on the side, right? A lot of people pick up because they either have to double what they bring in or lower what they put out or do both, but you can't keep doing what you're doing. That's exactly what's happening right now with the United States of America. And why this is so relevant, guys, is because I'm going to date myself here, but when I was a kid, and I think most of you guys are around my age, except maybe Natalia and Jasmine and Sharina. But when I was a kid, Saturday morning cartoons were the jam. Like, I mean, on Friday night, like I was getting game face on. Like I was like cracking my neck. I was like, let's go. Like, got to get up at 7 in the morning. Like, it's going to be on because we had 13 channels, period. Okay. No remote controls. Well, when I was a little older, we had remotes, but we had 13 channels. And after school, there was like 1.5 hours worth of cartoons. And then I remember distinctly all of like these either judge shows would come on, like, you know, Judge Judy or actually it was the People's Court. It was Judge Wapner. That's how old I am. And then the news, and my grandma and grandpa would always watch the news. So when I had 3 or 4 hours of cartoons back to back to back on Saturday morning, oh dude, I was up bright and early, bowl of cereal, like it's on. And one of my favorite cartoons was Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers, right? How many of you guys remember Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, right? And so there was one cartoon in particular where, you know, he's trying to get him and he sets up this bomb, right? And, you know, and do you guys remember what company made everything on Looney Tunes? What was the name of the company? Acme, yes. He had an Acme bomb and he was in an Acme storm cellar. So all of a sudden, my headphones died. All of a sudden, the coyote set the bomb, and without knowing it, the Roadrunner flipped the bomb on him, and he looked out the window, and the bomb was going to blow up right outside of his house. So the coyote just pulled the shade down. Like if he didn't see the bomb, it wasn't going to go off. And we all know what happened. Boom, right? There was a lot of violence in cartoons when I was a kid. It was great. But guys, that's what's happening to our clients. There's a bomb about to go off and they're doing this. Just pulling down the shade. If I don't see it, then I'm not going to worry about it. But guys, that's horrible. And that's where we come in. We have to be able to educate people. So let's tie this all together. Knowing what we know now, right? What do we need to do? Or what would be the solution for somebody? Knowing taxes are going to blow up because of what's happening, right? What do we need to start teaching people? How to do what, right? We need to teach people how to build tax-free retirement, right? And we do that very well with IULs, right? But like I tell people often, okay, I do, you know, in my client, and sometimes one of the ways that I kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? I try to like soften
the atmosphere when I'm talking to somebody who comes in and like, well, I've already talked to my financial advisor. And he says, I'm like, oh God. Right. So here's what I say to them. I said, listen, sir, financial advisors and insurance agents, somewhere down the road, kind of became the Bloods and the Crips. And I don't know why. Right. They don't need to be like enemies. Right. Here's what I tell you, sir, what I provide for you is an addition to what you should already be doing. Guys, Roth IRAs are really good. I have Roth IRAs. Roth IRAs are really good, but they cap you out. There's some obvious disadvantages. So I tell people all the time, especially in that situation, when I'm talking to the person who's like, well, my financial advisor, right? Then I'm like, look, I'm not trying to replace what he's doing. I'm not trying to tell you what he's doing is wrong. What I'm telling you is, sir, if you're not flexing 7702 in your portfolio, you're losing out. What's 7702, guys? The tax code that tells us that money grows underneath the life insurance policy tax-free. So, hey, I've got some real estate. Awesome. I do have a little bit of a pension. Awesome. I've got Social Security that I'm going to be bringing in. Awesome. I've got some Roth IRAs. Awesome. Do you have a 7702 account? No. Then you've got a hole in your boat, right? And that's the idea. That's what we've got to get. We've got to get to a place where we're not trying to fight against their financial advisors, right? We're trying to tell them we're coming alongside of them. Now, some people come to us and they're just straight sour on their financial advisor from Jump Street, right? We don't have to say that. At that point, we're just like, yeah, let me show you a good option. And you just go into the IUL. But if there's somebody who's like close, or they're trying to tell, like they're trying to be like, hey, my finance, then that's what I say. That's the verbiage that I use is, hey, I'm not trying to be the Bloods and the Crips, right? We could be, you guys know I'm born in LA. That's why I'm sharing, gang analogies. So I'll give you one. Like, we don't have to be, rivals. We could just be another gang in the neighborhood, but we kind of get along, right? We don't have to be rivals, is what I'm getting at. So the idea tonight, guys, is I hope I'm gonna record this, and I'm gonna put it up for you guys because I want you to be able to speak this. And I'm actually in the process of redoing our financial seminar as well, which is pretty awesome. Some of the information is a facelift. Some of the information we're changing. Things like this I'm going to add. So this information or bits and pieces of it will be part of our story, right? We're saying we're creating our closing arguments, right? As we're going and we get to the end of our presentation. But I want you to review this, but I want you to know this. These are the type of conversations that you have to have Saturday at the barbecue. You have to learn how to skillfully put these type of things in place. Man, yeah, how's work? Oh man, it's been awesome. I've just been really studying super hard on taxes. Why? Well, I got into retirement planning, right? No, yeah, actually what I do though is I use the insurance industry to plan for retirement. It's kind of different from like the Fidelity guys of the world. Oh yeah, it's crazy. And man, with all the stuff that it's about to happen, dude, I'm just trying to make sure I understand, help people kind of see the big old train that's barreling down on them as you're standing there with like a drink. What do you mean? Oh, well, you tell them little bits and pieces, and what you're doing is you start planting seeds. And a week later, a month later, when they realize when they finish doing their taxes, they're like, holy crap, dude, this is crazy. And they get upset, they're going to remember. Yeah, I was just talking to Sharina a couple of weeks ago, and she was telling me that she helps people, do tax-free stuff. We should hit her up. Sometimes you guys tell me, look, I have difficulty going and finding clients or customers. This is how you do it. You have to have the head knowledge to be able to go out there and speak to people and meet them where they're at, but do it in such a way where you're not like the Amway person who's trying to recruit them and be on your team and sell them juices, lotions, and potions, right? You have to have some skill set about yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Like I said,